I know he has my number, so you never know. Tonight we'll be hearing from Montechusett Tech and the Sewer Commission. Before we get started on those, is there anyone on the committee that has a comment, public comment or communication they want to share? Nothing? Any public comment from the public?
Good evening. Phyllis Luck, 50 Sunset Lane. I've become increasingly concerned about gaps in the budget process, and I'm hoping to start a conversation about how those gaps can be filled. As an illustration, I was unable to attend the February 14th FinCom meeting where the town manager presented her preliminary budget. About a week later, I finally had the chance to view it on YouTube. As a sitting member of the BOS, this is my 5th year, I was absolutely shocked to hear the town manager announce that she had included in that budget the hiring of an assistant town manager and a recreation director. I had never once heard of the need for either position discussed or even mentioned in my almost 5 years on the board. At the next FinCon meeting, I happened to mention to the chair that these hires were a complete surprise to me. And she replied that, that you guys assumed the budget had already been discussed by the BOS prior to the town manager's presentation to them. I concur that's a logical assumption, but unfortunately, an incorrect one. I agree with the FinCom chair that the preliminary budget should be discussed by the BOS and with the BOS prior to its presentation to the FinCom. It's a process issue and one that needs to be resolved. Perhaps FinCom and the BOS should hold a workshop after town meeting to review the budget process and take a look at lessons learned and fill these holes you can drive a truck through.
I just want to clarify that I didn't mean to indicate that I thought that the budget would have been shared with the BOS, but that the budget priorities would have been shared, and that would be something that the Board of Selectmen would set. And I think I've been saying that for as many years as I've been on this committee, that priorities need to be set by the Board of Selectmen.
Right.
But in terms of the budget presentation and the preliminary budget and the budget development process, we're not finished till March 28th. But it's also, I think, the way that MGL works and everything else works is the budget is presented to the Finance Committee, and I think at that time, and maybe it's looking at a schedule so that the Board of Selectmen and the town and the Finance Committee can hear it simultaneously. Because that's really our first shot at it as well. It's not anything that we knew was going to be in the budget, but we're always surprised when we see the budget. It's always our first look as well. And
well, I mean, we aren't even going to discuss it till next week,
I'm sorry?
I said, we haven't even had a discussion on it yet.
Okay, so the Board of Selectmen. Right, so basically, until it's the public hearing of the budget on March 28th that's really going to be where any final resolutions come up. But
usually people say it's too late by then. I feel
okay, well, I don't know that you've heard it from me that it's too late by then. I think that basically we've been through the budget process, and I think we've looked at the questions, and then at that point, the committee has a chance to hear what people are saying, and and it's also a town meeting. There's no reason why there can't be a change made to the budget. And that's why when he goes through it, he'll say, put a hold on it, and that's what people do. And certainly it was after the public hearing that the discussion around adding a firefighter ended up in there as well. So last year,
but that discussion was going on through the whole process.
That's true, but it's still, there's nothing finished until it's finished at town meeting. So, but I also will reiterate that yes, I think the Board of Selectmen should be talking about what they see are the priorities of the town, and that you would hope that, and that's what we're looking at, that the budget represent the priorities of the town, And that as we hear from all the individual departments, that's one of the things that we're taking into consideration, is how are those priorities expressed? So anyway, but I'll take what you say, but I think that basically the message, as far as from the FinCom's perspective, is that that's a BOS issue. So it's like...
Well, I just wanted to, I didn't want, that if I was sitting on the Finance Committee and I heard that presentation, I would have assumed that kind of thing, like hires, would have already been discussed. And so you wouldn't, because there wasn't the level of questioning that I would have, that I'm going to have next week. There wasn't how many hours, what's the job description, there's really a lot of, it hasn't been discussed at all. So to me, I think if I was sitting up there, I would have had more intense questions if I had known that no one had talked about it yet.
Okay, thank you. George?
Can I comment? So, Mrs. Luck, I want to just mention that the chairman of the BOS was at that budget presentation, and he raised no concerns.
I know.
What I read into that personally is like, okay, well, town manager reports to the selectmen, he must be on top of this. Maybe that's a mistake on my part, but
Right.
that's what I read into the
Well,
situation.
that's kind of where I'm going with this, that if I was sitting in your seats, that's what I would have thought, that it's already been decided that this is what the BOS's priority. That's exactly why I think it's a flaw in the process.
Okay.
Yeah, I agree, yeah.
Thanks.
Budget time is always a fun time. But it is, I mean, I'm sorry?
Not too many meetings either.
Well, it's an important part of what the town does. And it's basically, and then when you go through and you hear all year long what people are looking for, what people need, and people have different priorities. And one of the things that tends to happen, and this is really the only place that I really see it come together, is that people are siloed. And they can't help but be siloed. They're interested in what they're interested in. And where the balancing comes in is the putting together the entire budget. And it's not until you have all of those competing needs for those finite resources that, you do the best you can to try to figure out never mind those holes in terms of process, but those holes in terms of where is there a service need. So. But anyway, your point is taken, and certainly if the BOS ever wanted to sit down with us, we'd be happy to come. Some of us. Otherwise, we'd be happy to have you, and we have cookies. So you might want to actually come on a BOS, bring the BOS here. And we'll leave it with that. Any other public comments from the public? Yes, there's cake there too, Carl. Yes. Okay. With that, then, we'll invite Monty Tech up to come and present their budget for next year. And this gets a little bit easier to understand every year, and after 7 years, I almost know what you're talking about sometimes. So, hi, Barbara.
Thank you for having us, and I did just want to say, as the rep from Lunenburg on the Monty Tech School Committee, how proud I am and all of the work that the school has done and the result from the students. We hear some of it in the newspaper, and our newest program is the Vet Tech, which I'm not going to take any thunder away from Dr. Harity. I'm going to let her talk about it, but I just wanted to say that it's really an honor to serve the town in that way, and I have served the town previous in your seats and other seats in town, but this is really the cream of the crop. I think that's it.
And we're thrilled Barbara's on our committee. She's a wonderful school committee member, very, very supportive of the school, and very easy to work with. We appreciate that. So Tammy and I want to give you the great news. Tammy has promised that she's going to present the budget light.
Excellent.
So I said, Tammy, you only have about 10 slides. So in my packet, I put together a PowerPoint just so I could give you some of the overviews of of what we've been working on the last year. So, as you know, Monty Tech on page 1 represents 18 communities, and here are the 18 communities. Slide 2, we now have, as Barbara mentioned, our 21st technical program, and here are all the particular technical programs that we offer at Monty Tech at our high school. The next slide is our great success of our students. The graduation and dropout rate just came out, and I'm really proud to share with you that 99.7% four-year graduation rate at Monty Tech with a 0.1% dropout rate. We're very balanced between males and females, and our students are soaring in the MCAS exams, and we put those percentages of proficient and advanced. In addition, we always reach out and try to get grant support for very large equipment items. One of them, we actually had received a $495,000 grant, the Skills Capital Grant that the state has. And the year before, we received a $500,000 for our machining program, and this year we received another $500,000 so that we could create a ARM lab, which is an automation, robotics, and mechatronic area, and we're combining in cross-curriculum the electrical engineering and the computer-aided design. So that's really exciting. And then I don't have to read them all to you, but it allows our students the opportunity to fill so many different positions within this industry that certainly has high workforce demands in this region. The next slide is something we're very, very proud of, and we've been busy working at for the last 3 years. This is our brand new veterinary science program. The program itself has been in existence for 2 years. We have freshmen and sophomore now, but the new program was built by our construction students and our construction faculty, and that is the front page, the beautiful picture of the entrance. So we really wanted to come up with ways. We did not go to any of the communities to ask for any additional dollars to start this program, and no additional dollars to actually build the facility. Our own 16 and 17-year-old construction students, this was the first time really they've been exposed to commercial level curriculum, and our staff was up for the challenge. They met with our architects, Limmer and Pagano, and actually increase the rigors and the complexity of the job just because they wanted to expose the students to really so many different aspects of commercial industry. And you'll see those are the various trades that were involved. In addition, so now that we have the labor, what are we going to do for the monies to buy all the supplies? Well, we wrote many grants. We applied for foundation support, and we went out to our community and asked if they would be willing to help support this venture. And North Central Mass is a very generous community, a very generous region, and there's a lot of animal lovers in the area. We were able to raise over $1.26 million in the 2-year component, from basic individual donations to someone that gave us over $400,000. And as I mentioned, the in-kind labor by our own high school students saved the district $1.125. The next slide shows you the 2 phases in which we actually constructed the project. I went through the whole architectural fees and so forth and all the aspects. And we broke ground September 7th, 2016. And we thought it'd be nice to share with you some of the pictures, and those are the next ones that are sliding through. As you saw, and I'll remind you in these pictures, our students did probably about 95% of the work. We did not have a technical program that actually dug in the excavation or poured the foundation, so we had to contract out with that. It's not often that your school district is actually a general contractor. Pete Maxfield, our house carpentry instructor, actually pulled the permit, his own personal permit, for us to complete this job. So he actually wanted to upgrade the roofing system and teach the students some real technical skills. Then this project received the attention from Governor Baker. It's a wonderful state public public-private partnership. So he came out, and originally he was going to speak to the students and have an auditorium kind of conversation. And when he got to the site, he was like, I don't want to interrupt this work. I want to be able to roam through the building and talk to the students specifically about the project and what they're learning and what they'll be doing in the future. The next few slides, I'm so proud to share with you. These are the completed pictures of the clinic. And as you continue to flip through, I'll continue to remind you, when you see the display cases with all the dog supplies, that was our cabinet making students. The benches that you're seeing are a cabinet. In the lobby, we actually did a whole tribute to the 6 different trades in the 3 years of students that were part of the project. We want to thank them forever. So their pictures are in the lobby and will stay in the lobby. Then there's pictures of the exam room, plus we have 2 classrooms. Our students are out there now studying. So we had a ribbon cutting, and we're very fortunate Barbara was able to join us as well as your town manager. We greatly appreciate her support as well, and many local officials, and as well as Governor Baker decided to come on back and see the finished project and congratulate the students. So those are those completed slides. In addition, our next thing that we're working on is the building is over 50 years old. And as you know, I still feel a little new, even though it's been 5 years as a superintendent. I'm amazed at the commitment by Monty Tech for decades to keep up with the facility, the cleanliness, and so forth. But we realize it's over 50 years old. So we actually put an RFP out, and those are the dates in which we're requesting service from a company to come in and really give us assessment, look behind the walls, and so forth. We've done some upgrades, but again, nowhere near all the things that need to be done. So we're going to actually get that completed and have a full report that we'll be able to share next round with you, but we'll have the report in the fall. At this point, I'd like to ask Tammy Crockett to come on up, and she is going to give you a wonderful overview of the Monty Tech budget.
Okay.
Thank you.
Congratulations on completing that project. That's super. Yeah.
Good evening. It seems like it's quicker and quicker our time back here. And the superintendent, as she said I'll be a little quicker this evening. So Lunenburg's assessment goes down this year. Thank you very much for having us. I hope that was
Thank
enough.
you very much for coming. Yes.
All right, I'll give a little more detail.
Okay.
Anyways, thank you very much. So I'm starting off in the slide number 20 after the facilities assessment piece that Dr. Harity went through. So I want to tell you a little bit about how the governor's budget, House 1, affected Monty Tech. Because we're this early, and as you are putting your town's budget together, you know that we're working off of the governor's numbers because we don't have the final state numbers until June, sometimes July, August. So a little bit of an overview of what's going on for us. Our total proposed FY20 budget we're proposing is $28,760,202. That's a $1 million increase, 1,003,828, or 3.62%. Most of that increase, as you'll see in the later slides, is actually due to our required net school spending increase. We are very close to our actual net school spending requirement. In this FY20 budget, this proposes to be 1.1% above the net school spending requirement. In FY19, we are actually 0.6% above our requirement. So pretty much as that goes up, our budget goes up. In our net school spending went up $793,110 of that $1 million increase, or 3.29%. And I also, and on your slide, you'll also see that I say we're projected to be 1.1% above net school spending based on the governor's numbers. Because last year when I came before you to tell you we were 0.8% above net school spending, by the time the final budget came about in June, July, that time, and the school committee just voted on finalizing the FY19 budget in February. That's when we dropped to 0.6, because when the governor makes changes, when the formula changes a bit throughout the final budget, it usually affects our net school spending number. So this is where we're at based upon the governor's numbers. Our state aid Chapter 70 has increased by $545,406. As you know, in your hearing, education is a big hot topic this year in the state budget. So a lot of effort and money and funding and thought is being put into how the government is going to help fund education and keep up with the rising expenses, especially in special education and in fringe benefits. Those are the two highest ones. So in this governor's budget for FY20, there are some startings. Some of the senators and other members of the legislature still don't quite think it's enough, nor do we, nor do you. But it's what we have to work with right now based on the governor's numbers. So we're hoping to see possibly some more state aid as this budget process goes through, but this is as it is. The next component of our budget is the required district contributions from all our community members. Because after state aid, Chapter 70, the next biggest component that makes up revenue to the Monty Tech budget is the assessments from our member communities. And the largest component of that assessment to each town is what the state sets as your required minimum, each community's. And the state sets that number separate. It's a different number for every community, and it's based on each community's ability to pay. And how they factor that is based on income and property valuation for the community, and then they multiply those numbers they get by a municipal revenue growth factor. And they come up with some numbers, and they split it between all the schools the town belongs to. And that's how they come up with the required district contribution. And that really is the largest component. And as I say, our total assessment increase this year is $351,532. Lunenburg goes down because the student enrollment goes down. But in total, our communities are going up. But 70% of that is really because of the state formula and what they set for the required contribution. And transportation aid, which is the third largest amount of revenue that Monty Tech gets, is in the governor's number has been funded equal to FY19 so far. So what that means for Monty Tech is that we're getting a little less, because when the pie stays the same, but more people are eating off of it, each person gets a smaller slice. I took that from the lovely food that's right there. So that's why, because every school district and regional their expenses are going up, so they're buying for more of the revenue, the state aid, and so the pieces going to everybody is a little less. So I'm moving on to the next slide that says FY20 Chapter 70 summary. This really is a visual of everything I just said to you. It represents what's going on with the governor's budget and how it affects Monty Tech. So I'd like to kind of be on the side that says comparison to FY19, because that is the FY20 information. So comparing the enrollment, and again, this is the foundation enrollment. Our foundation enrollment actually went down this year by 13 pupils. So it's set at 1,474. But our foundation budget went up by 793,110, and that's what I had mentioned before. That's the equivalent to our net school spending number. And that's based on a whole bunch of factors behind it that the state says, Monty Tech, you're gonna spend XXXX on all these categories and administration and fringe benefit and instructors, and they have the whole formula, and they put it all together and they come up with how much you're gonna spend per pupil at a minimum. Monty Tech's minimum spending per pupil, I've highlighted above, is $16,898. Vocational spending is the highest spending because we do everything a comprehensive school does with academics, but then we also have the vocational piece, and vocational equipment, as you saw in Dr. Harity's grant slide, $400,000 for a couple pieces of equipment, so that adds up very quickly. So that's why we have higher standards that we're held to for spending. So that's how our foundation budget gets set. And then I spoke to you about the required district contributions and how those went up. And the total from all of our communities, as you can see, is $9,628,894. And again, that's taking the ability to pay from every community, all 18 that belong to Monty Tech, and totaling it there. The difference between our foundation budget and what the communities need to pay is what we get in Chapter 70. So that's the $15,279,154. And again, I told you how that is going up $545,406. And you can see the net school spending. I want to take a second to show you the section below where it says Chapter 70% of foundation. So you can see in fiscal 20, we are receiving 61.34% of our foundation budget, of our required spending, is coming from Chapter 70. So it's not quite an equal split yet, but it's pretty close. I'm going to move on to the next slide that's entitled District Enrollment and Contributions. Again, this is a breakdown to the required minimum. I think it's very important to keep hitting on this component because this is what affects the towns the most. It is between 80 and 94% of a community's assessment, of their total assessment to Monty Tech, is part of this required minimum contribution. So as you can see on this slide, the arrows coming down show what the requirement is this year, FY20, for the communities. So I will point out to you, Lunenburg, as you dropped 8 students, you went from 82 to 74. You can see, moving over, that your required minimum amount went down by $38,287. So it's a direct correlation to the decrease in enrollment. And you can see what happened with the other communities. We had some larger increases in communities and some decreases. The next slide, 23, is our total Monty Tech budget. It's the fiscal year 20 budget summary. This breaks it all down for you between the expenses and the revenues. So starting with the proposed 20, you can see that again, our net school spending requirement, we start there, $24,908,048. That's what the state set. Our transportation, that's what we pay to operate the 30 buses that bring the students to the school. That's $1,979,340. That's an increase this year of $43,180. That's contractual. Our above net school spending number, as I pointed out to you earlier, this budget represents us being 1.1% above the requirement. Our capital budget, $290,000. We keep that the same, and we have kept that number the same for several years. We cap our capital projects at $250,000 per year, and we transfer $40,000 into our stabilization account, and I will talk to that in a few minutes. So we really try to keep our projects to that amount. Well, that's very difficult in some instances. As Dr. Harity pointed out, this year we're doing the facilities assessment because as good as the building looks, it is 50 years old. And several other vocational schools, high schools, elementary schools that are younger than 50 years old have already been replaced, renovated, remodeled, fixed. And we want to see what's going on. We want to see although the outside and the stuff you can see looks great, we need to find out what's going on with 50, 55-year-old electrical and plumbing and everything else that's under. So we need to take a really good look, because we have issues that we have to fix, because it is a 50-year-old building. So maintaining to that has been a priority to us, so that we've had a stable assessment to the community, so we work within those means, and we will do a priority list after the facilities assessment. The next component is the vehicles, $125,000. We have an increase there of $40,000 because we're looking to purchase, on top of a school bus, we're looking to purchase a new, to replace one, vocational shop van, because we have 8 vans for our shops, because they go to different work sites as vocational. Carpentry goes out and does community projects, electrical, all of our vocational programs. And the newest van is 6 years old. And on average, they're 8 to 10 years old. So we're in the process now that we have to replace one. So that's where that comes into play. And the bonds, the last component, the 1.1 million, that's from our 20-year-old building renovation when we did the auditorium and the gym. This is our fiscal 20, is our last year for the bonding. And we're still under the old school building authority method. So that's part of our debt schedule there. So those are the items that give us the $28,760,202, or that $1 million increase that I talked about. Going down the list, you can see we've applied the revenues, as I've showed you, the Chapter 70, 15 million. And up to item 1, we have the required minimum contribution for the communities. That's in total, and that's as I showed you on the previous page. The next section just takes the total transportation of 1.9 plus the above net school spending and adds those two together, and that's where you get the 2.2. We subtract out what we're getting in estimated transportation aid from this governor's budget and what we are proposing to use from excess and deficiency to offset this component of the assessment to our communities. So for this component of the assessment to the communities, we're proposing it to be $733,060. The next section is for the capital. And again, from above, that's the $290,000 and the $125,000, less another $125,000 that we propose using from our excess and deficiency to offset the assessment to our communities. So that leaves a capital component to communities in total, $290,000. And the following piece is the bonds, as I discussed, per the debt schedule, in the amount that we get annually as an offset from the school building authority. So that will leave a component to the communities of $240,736. And that leaves the total assessments that we're proposing this year of $10,892,689. This is a $351,532 increase. And as I discussed on my first slide, 270,000 of that, or 247,000 of that, excuse me, actually came from the state in the required minimum contribution increase, which is, you can see clear if you refer back up to number 1. So you can see that that's a large component of the increase assessment. The next slide is the community enrollments. So to the left, I show you where your communities are, your foundation enrollments. And the other piece is your school attending children. The other side is a comparison to the current fiscal year of 19. And again, just as a reminder, school attending children is the students who live in your community, no matter what type of schooling they attend, homeschool, private school, charter school, Monty Tech, public school, who are in grades 1 through 12. We get those numbers from your superintendent's office. Reason it's 1 through 12 is kindergarten was not in play when we developed the district agreement. We get those numbers from your superintendents, and that is twofold. we take that number, so for Lunenburg, that's 1,715, and if we take that over the total that we have for the school attending children in the district of 24,724, Lunenburg represents 6.94% of our total district's school attending children. That has meaning for the town of Lunenburg in two ways when it comes to Monty Tech's budget, or Monty Tech, I should say. One, it's how your capital components are assessed. So the bonds and the capital piece, you will be assessed at 6.94%. The second component of how it affects Lunenburg is your quota for the freshman class. When the school committee sets the freshman quota, which was set at 355 last evening, Lunenburg is entitled to 6.94%, rounded to the whole child, of that number. Here, we can only take your arm, young man.
6 periods.
Yes, so that's very important. These numbers affect the numbers for the town significantly in two ways. So that's how the enrollment. The other side for foundation, we take your foundation enrollment divided by the total foundation enrollment. So in that regards, Lunenburg represents 5.02%. So for the operating piece of our assessment, Lunenburg is assessed at 5.02%. And you'll see that in play going to the next slide of community assessments. You can see under Lunenburg, we have 1 million, so going across the columns, foundation budget, 1,250,472. That's what the state says we, Monty Tech, from our net school spending requirement, you can see the total of that column, we've seen it before. Our requirement is to spend $16,898 per pupil. So it's purely that math times the number of students from Lunenburg in the foundation enrollment, which I think we just said was 74. So it's 74 times 16,898 to come up with that. The next column, as I pointed out, is your required minimum. That again is set by the state, by the ability to pay per them. So you can see that's 710,370. Transportation and operation, if you go back to that budget summary page and you look at the net total for number 2, which was our transportation plus our above net school spending, less the revenues we're applying to it, you saw the net of all the assessments. We saw that Lunenburg represents 5.02% of that total of 733,060. So that's where that 36,802 comes from. The other column of 20,116, again, going back to that budget summary, section 3, you'll see that that's our proposed capital expenditures of 415, less the E&D that's going to it. So that netted out to 290 to all the communities. Now this is where the capital assessment component comes in, the Lunenburg. So that percentage gets applied here. And then the last component is the bonds. That was based on the debt schedule, less our SBA aid, times Lunenburg, which nets out to the 247.36, times Lunenburg's capital percentage. So those items in white get added together to come up with the proposed assessment for Lunenburg of 783,987. Now this is a decrease from FY19's assessment of 36,573. And again, that is because the student enrollment dropped and it's an indirect correlation. But you can see how I mentioned your minimum contribution for most towns becomes 80 to 90%. And I did give you yours, and yours is 91%. Your required minimum contribution is actually 91% of your total assessment to the school. So you can see how the valuations that the state determines are extremely important in the factoring of what your total assessment will be. Moving on to the summary by function code. This is where I give you a breakdown of our budget by at the high level up by the codes that we give to DESE. So you can see, comparing FY20 to FY19, you can see where some of the larger changes are. And I actually highlighted those, and I was going to speak to them on the next couple of slides. But I just wanted to give you this for your reference. So you can look over the past couple of fiscal years, and you can see what functions, what services, what types of activities Monty Tech has been spending the money on at a quick glance. That's what this is for. And as you're looking, you're probably noting, ooh, there's some larger increases I see. I'd like for you to talk about some of those. So I am going to talk about some of those on the next slide. You get your wish. The next slide for the budget highlights, the FY20 budget highlights that I'd like to point out. This budget has one new FTE in it. And Dr. Harity had a lot of gorgeous photos to show you of our vet tech clinic. Well, we've had one teacher in there who's paid from the Perkins grant. Now, for next year, we're going to have 3 grades there. So we need the second teacher. So next year, we'll be hiring the second veterinary science instructor. We're also going to be hiring the clinic office manager over there, but we did some reorganization, and through attrition, we did not replace a secretary, and this position is meant to offset that. So that's where the new FTE comes into place. Second large component of the budget, of course, which is always the largest piece, is the salary increases for staff. So this budget represents a 1.5% COLA for all staff, and where applicable, so meaning for instructional staff, secretarial, custodial, steps, and/or column movements are also within this. And that represents a $350,000 increase of that $1 million increase. Second component that was significant, as I pointed out, was the transportation. Again, that was $48,000. Technology, you're going to see that in a lot of our line items and in a lot of the functions. We have a significant increase in this year's technology budget. There's several contributing factors to that. First is we are a one-to-one school district, so all of our students have Chromebooks. We are finishing year 3 of the lease. Next year will be a year 1 of a new lease. And believe it or not, sometimes you think technology goes down, but the cost is actually going up a bit for the new lease, for the Chromebooks. So that's one component. Second component is our engineering technology shop is very technology heavy, and they have some desktop computers that are really high caliber computers for their needs, for the engineering shop. And we need to replace them as they're 5 years old. And for an annual lease to replace the computers in the engineering shop, that is just shy of $100,000 per year to lease them. So that's another large component of it. Second, we've had to upgrade and we had to buy a lot more software, because now that we have Chromebooks and we're trying to get less textbooks and other less printed materials, our software expenses are going up, and the software teachers are using, it's advancing and going up. And with everybody using technology, we're getting grants to buy new equipment for our shops and enhance it. All of this new equipment is needing more enhanced infrastructure in our technology needs. So we have to replace some of, and I'm no techie, so forgive me with my wording, but our wireless access points, some of our fiber lines, all kinds of that type of infrastructure. So that is something we're seeing a large increase that we need, because that is the way of the future, I guess, when you're trying to not be so paper driven. Some other large increases, moving on, is health insurance. So I've budgeted a 5% increase for active and retired employees. I hope that is enough. This year we saw a 3% increase. So conservative, but pretty much in the range. So that brings about a $150,000 increase. The next, I spoke to you earlier about the vocational shop vehicle and the need for it. And lastly was maintenance. The maintenance is not just of the building. I did talk to you about the needs that we have for the building, but it's also for the equipment in the shops. The instructors have put in a lot of equipment. We get grants, we fund money in the budget, but we cannot replace every piece of equipment in every shop as it's dating. We just can't, it's too expensive. So in some cases, we are spending $3,000, $4,000, $5,000, $6,000 to fix something, to maintain it or fix it, because it's a lot more efficient than paying $150,000, $175,000 for the new piece of equipment. So our maintenance costs are going up, and that's another reason. That reflects $70,000 as part of this budget. Lastly, I just wanted to talk about the capital component. And really what I wanted to talk about in the capital component is a piece of what we're asking for in capital is a transfer to stabilization of $40,000. Currently, the balance in our stabilization fund is $185,550. We are trying to build that fund at a small increments each year to get it to a point where when we find out what we have to replace, when we have the big ticket items, if we have something that becomes an emergency, a large thing, that we don't have to go back to our communities, or we don't have to have a large spike in an assessment. So we're trying to build that fund up at a reasonable rate as opposed to having a spike one year. So I think that's important to point out to you. And that is my main. Also, just before I finish, at the Finance Committee's place settings and at others, you have a copy of the full budget, so if you have questions on the line items. And also at Finance Committees, I gave you a snapshot of Lunenburg itself, of how your assessment changed from 19 to 20 and what made up each piece. And I also gave you the piece from the state that gives you the specifics about your ability to pay as determined by the state. So it shows what numbers they used for your property valuation and the incomes and your municipal revenue growth factor. So I would be happy to entertain and answer any questions you may have.
Go for it.
I have two questions. So after your 50-year building assessment, do you plan to have your students do the work like they did for the vet building?
It will fully depend on what the work is.
Okay.
Yes, if it is wiring, we always have the kids help out with wirings, plumbing, things like that. As long as it's nothing beyond them, absolutely. We utilize them and our instructors whenever we can.
I hope so. And my second question is, do you plan to change the knowledge of what grades are assessed, since we don't include kindergarten for Lunenburg? In the future, do you see that as something that you want to include when we're getting assessed for how many kids are in the schools? And
No, I think it's been
1 through
working.
12 and it's fine?
Yep.
Okay.
As long as it stays consistent and stays the same throughout the communities, we're still basing it on the same criteria as we always have.
Well, I guess that question goes to, how far out does the district agreements go?
How far out?
I'm going to assume that we do 1 to 12 because it's part of the agreement.
Yes, it is.
The agreement lasts year to year. The agreement is standing agreement from the day it
Been the
started.
standing agreement.
Okay.
Yes.
So basically, it just is what it is.
It is.
Okay.
Yes, correct.
Thank you.
Thank you.
That does
Great
clarify it.
questions. Yep.
Any other questions?
Yeah, would you know what the foundation enrollment was in 2018, FY 2018 from Lunenburg?
Yes.
Because we got 19 and we got 20. Just wondering what happened in 18.
Yes, and if, actually, that's a great question, because I would love to point out some things in your big budget book. You could actually start in the back. That will be easier in your big budget book. And if you go to the second to the last
like an
page,
eye
or
chart.
third to the last page.
It looks much like an eye chart to me.
Yes, my printer only prints at a 4 font.
It's basically the next to last page.
Yeah, or page 22.
Can I see the cover page of what you're looking at?
This one.
Okay.
So if you go back, page 22 I'm on, it's a foundation enrollment history. So you will go from 2018 to 1994. And I actually did email a PDF of this budget over to Elaine Peterson.
Yes,
So if
yes.
anybody would
I
like
have
it
it bigger.
electronically,
Yes, I have it
yes,
bigger,
be
yes.
happy. Like I joke, and everybody does, my computer only prints font 4, so.
But, and then basically, one of the questions that I have is, all right, so our total assessment is 783,987.
Yes, 783,987, yes.
Foundation enrollment, the 74 is the 74 students attending.
Foundation enrollment is actually pupils enrolled at Monty Tech, school choice pupils. So those would be students living in Lunenburg who attend a different vocational school. Or it would be, we have a Chapter 74 PN program that it also gets counted into the foundation enrollment. But I will say Lunenburg has 72 students at Monty Tech and 2 are school choice.
Okay.
So that, I guess that, I'm trying to understand these numbers. So it looks like for the past 3 years, if I'm reading this correctly, we've gone from 92 to 82
You are
to
correct.
74.
You're correct.
And I'm seeing the enrollments at the high school in town trending the same way. Do you have a handle on why these numbers are going down?
Well, we have seen, especially in Central Mass, that total student populations are declining. I don't know if the superintendent has any other insights about the decline in enrollments. Yeah, we have seen in certain parts of Massachusetts. Yeah, really. Declines in total pupil populations.
Okay.
And then all of a sudden, it'll spike at kindergarten.
You're correct, correct.
Second
Yes. You can see if you look throughout, if you look at the chart, you will see some ebbs and flows.
Okay. Yeah, the reason I'm asking, a few years ago, I did a population study, and it looked like from 18 to 2, the population's trending down.
You're correct, yeah. We're seeing that in the numbers. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
So, does having a brand-new high school is there anything behind that where the kids would rather go to a new building versus?
Oh, I would say your new high school is probably a great draw to keep your students in their public high school. But it's really individual's choice. Some prefer the vocational education, so whether you have a new high school or not. So, but certainly that probably is a factor. Yes.
Okay,
Yeah.
thank you.
Okay, if our enrollment didn't go down, what effect would that have on the total assessment?
If it stayed the same,
Right.
it would have increased.
Okay, so the 10,594 would be the number that would go with whatever that number is under the foundation enrollment.
The 10,500.
Okay, so the town's assessed per pupil, the town's
Oh,
assessed
yes,
per pupil.
yes.
Right, so it's the 10,000 is the operating number.
Yes.
Okay.
I break that out so you can see really how your towns, even though it went down, you can see that the per pupil amount that you're spending, and this is what the town is from the tax base is spending per pupil.
Okay.
Yep. Yes.
Any other questions? Hannah? No?
Not most up.
You're okay? Jack?
I'm all set.
George? I'll come back to George.
Yeah,
Mark?
thank you.
Well, my only worry was that the proposed transportation aid decreased from Finance 19,
Yes.
which is not very typical. Is there a reason for it?
Yes. Well, it was funded at the same amount, but I will say, Dr. Harity and myself, as well as a bunch of other school officials, attended a meeting last Friday where legislators were there. So we had state, it was a wonderful breakfast. We had state reps and legislators there where they were talking about school funding issues, and they are all advocating very much for increasing school spending. And I will particularly point to Senator Tran, who is trying to get a bill out there to increase, because in the law, in the statute, it says that the legislator will fund regional transportation at 100%. It was one of those nuggets they gave regionals to try to regionalize, but then it has the term subject to appropriation in there, which is why we've never been funded at 100%, more like between 70 and 80. But he would like to get the current numbers increased, and he would also like to try to get the term subject to appropriation taken out of there. So transportation is one of those ones that does change quite a bit during the different iterations of the budget. So I'm still cautiously optimistic that we could see something there. And we're certainly fighting for it, and thank you for pointing that out. Yes.
George?
Yep, final question.
Yes.
So I'm not really disputing the need over future new building. When we get to that point, does each town in the district vote on that building?
Yes, yes. If we were going to go out for a bond issuance, we would need 100% approval.
Okay, so out of the 18, looks like 18 towns in the
We would
district?
need everyone.
Every single town would have to approve that?
Yes, yes.
Okay.
Are you saying that you would approve that? Can I put you on?
I'm just, not knowing that,
Yes,
I'm not very well grounded in how regional schools work.
yes. We would need that approval.
Okay,
Absolutely.
okay.
But I think it was the same for the auditorium when
Correct. We did. We got approval.
Right. And actually, because they have Barbara sitting over there on their committee there, I'm sure that whatever they come in for a budget is going to be, have gone through a good look. She used to be a finance committee member for Lunenburg, so. But anyway, I'll open it up. Does anybody here have any questions that they'd like to ask of Monty Tech? Come on up, please. Just give us your name, your address, and then direct any questions through the chair.
My name is Sarah Kammer. I live at 304 Lancaster Ave. I had two questions about Monty Tech. I was wondering how they determined the quota for Lunenburg. And the second one was approximately how much Chapter 70 funding do they spend per student at Monty Tech? Thank you.
Great questions. So to answer the first one, how do we determine the quota for Lunenburg? If you refer back to the page where it has the percentages, and that is in the slide. It's called Community Enrollment, slide 24. There's a couple of columns there. One is foundation enrollment and one is school attending children. So the school attending children is that component I discussed where we ask the superintendent to give us all the students who are in grades 1 through 12, regardless of where they go to school, whether it's homeschooling, private schooling, parochial, anything, and they give us a count. So we received a count of 1,715 pupils. from the Lunenburg Superintendent's Office. Based on that number against all of the other numbers we receive from our district, so Ashburnham 1029, Ashby 408, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, we got a total of what we call school attending children of 24,724. We simply divide Lunenburg into that number to see what percentage Lunenburg is of that total, of the total number. And in this instance, Lunenburg represents 6.94%. It's the number next to it, of all the students in the district for school attending, what we consider school attending. So as of last evening, the Monty Tech School Committee set the freshman quota number. And really how that's determined is we're trying to keep a total enrollment at the school of 1435. That evens out the grade levels. So we look at what we have for the students in the upper grades. We take out the seniors who will be graduating, and we move everybody up the grades and see what we have. And from there, we determine what should be the freshman quota number to keep the school balanced. So at last night's meeting, the school committee determined that that number should be 355 freshmen. So we take that number, 355, and we multiply it by 6.94% in Lunenburg's case, and that's how we would get the freshman quota number for Lunenburg. Did that help? Okay, wonderful. And then to the next question, how much Chapter 70 aid do we spend per pupil? We would want to move to the next sheet called community assessments so we can see that kind of in action. How our Chapter 70 in a simplified formula works is the state takes that first blue column, 24,908,048, and they subtract column number 1. That's required minimum contribution. So the first column, again, represents the number of pupils in each town times that 16,898 per pupil that the state has said we are required to minimally spend, net school spending. That's what we're required to spend. They take that, they subtract what they say they want the communities to contribute towards that number. So in Lunenburg's case, the state says, Monty Tech, the spending on Lunenburg students of that 24 million is representative of 1,250,472. Of that, we expect Lunenburg to be able to pay 710,370 of that. That's the required minimum. And they simply take the difference of those two numbers, and that is how much Chapter 70 money we get on behalf of Lunenburg. That same formula applies all the way down to every community. So it's all based on the 16,898 for every community, but every community is different. Every community's ability to pay is different. As you saw earlier, Lunenburg's assessment is 10,000 per pupil coming from the Lunenburg tax base, whereas another district, another town might be 3,000 that they pay. So we get more Chapter 70 for them. So we always expend the difference between the 16,800, we always spend at minimum 16,898 per pupil in this coming year on a pupil. It's broken up from the community and from the state. From the state. It's just broken into different pieces depending on the community because their ability to pay is different. I hope that was wonderful.
Okay. All right. Well, if there's no other questions,
One more.
George?
Sorry. So in your student counts by town, does that include students that are being homeschooled and private school?
It does under the school attending children number, yes.
Okay.
Yes.
So that's
We-
both
We
public
want to
and
recognize
private.
all students who are eligible to be in grades 1 through 12.
Okay.
Yep.
Last chance? Going once? All right, thank you very much.
Thank you once again. It was a pleasure to be here. Thank
It's
you
a lot
very
of
much.
information to try to break out, so. Go ahead.
Is that one not working?
That's not a bathroom.
It's not a bathroom anymore? It used to be.
Is that what, yeah, maybe it is working then. I have no idea.
Okay, I'll do downstairs. Do you want anything while I'm down there?
No, thanks. Carla, do you have stuff to set up? Oh, yes, you have stuff to set up, okay.
Oh, am I crowding you? Sorry.
Barbara, thank you, I can read it.
Wheel myself out of the way.
Look up the spreadsheet you gave me.
I'm gonna just walk out to the hallway for a second.
Okay, we're evidently taking a break.
Can
Carl,
I
you
get
have-
anything while I'm up?
No, thank you.
Sorry, Terry.
It's my fault, I understand, it's my fault.
It's your fault.
Just kidding.
What
Sorry,
did you
Carl.
expect would happen?
That's right.
I guess that was about it, yeah.
I may have to look at that.
Well, I checked the agenda to see if there's anything else we could take up while we're getting set up here, but since everybody left, Hannah?
I sent out minutes.
Yes, you did send out minutes. I'm sorry?
I bet you know how to do these.
Okay.
For some reason, it's coming up like this.
We should
But
probably wait till
Wait till
I'd like to just have one big
everyone's back.
slide.
I will say though that I didn't get an attachment from Jack yet. So if you guys
Put a plug in
have a
there.
copy of it, I can take a
It is
picture of
because you
it
plugged in there.
and attach it that way.
That's fine. I will say that the email, there was an email that went out from the town manager looking for minutes. I turned minutes in today.
Oh, yeah, yeah,
You don't
yeah.
want this.
I just
That
brought
I saw,
them.
thank you.
And I think, I think there was some confusion on my part. For some reason, I thought you were sending them right over.
Oh, me?
Yes.
Oh, I didn't know that. I'm sorry.
That's okay. I'll give you the, you don't have the email address, so I'll give it to you.
I appreciate it.
Yeah, that would be. So that was a miscue on my
So
part.
sorry.
No, that was my fault. But we will, actually, I should ask, Mark, did you or Jay have a chance to read the minutes from the 14th? Okay. And Michelle did as well? Can I have a motion to approve the minutes?
You can have a motion to approve the minutes.
Do I have a second?
I second.
In a second. All in favor?
Aye.
And aye, okay. So we'll at least approve the minutes from February 14th.
You were down there and you didn't get anything.
I take home from my daughter.
This was like,
It's always scary when they set up technology and somebody says, don't touch it. Okay. All right, and I'm going to assume that this is available for PAC to put up? Yes. Okay, so, all right, so we're ready to move then to the slide presentation for the Sewer Commission. Well, actually, if you
Yeah,
can
I
project a
can't.
little bit so people behind you can hear.
Yeah, that's what this is supposed to, there we go.
There you go.
Oh, that's better. Thank you, John. Okay, Carl Luck, 50 Sunset Lane, presenting the Sewer Commission's budget this year, and I want to actually thank you for the opportunity to do this. This is really the chance that our customers and our citizens get to see what's really going on in the sewer enterprise fund, and so thank you. Okay, this is the current sewer team that supports the town. It's basically the same team. Barb, our business manager, who's here with me tonight. Jack Broadington's, oversees the operations. And the commissioners, current commissioner, Joe Anderson, who's our chairman, who's here with me tonight. Myself as vice chair. John Reynolds, our current clerk. Joan Pease, and our new member. Oh, I got the wrong slide. How'd that happen, Barb? Okay, we didn't fix this one. Troy Daniels has moved out of town, so he's no longer with us, and Ryan Strober has taken that position at the election last year. Jane Ranley is the minutes taker, but she also helps out Barb administratively, so I wanted to give her credit for that. And then our contractors haven't changed, so they're all the same. Okay. All right, this hasn't changed at all every year, but for anyone who's moved to town or hasn't seen this already, I think it's a good opportunity to let people know what our mission is. First, clearly, it's to provide sewer service to areas of the town, and I've highlighted in need, and that's a critical term in terms of sewer, what we provide. It's really for people that are in need, that areas of the town that are in need due to inability to really support septic systems. We encourage septic systems; they're good for the environment. But if you're in need, we need to help you out. We operate our Bible is the comprehensive wastewater management plan that was established I think 2010, I think, and that's basically our roadmap. What areas of town get serviced, why they get serviced. It's a very comprehensive document. We keep it updated. I think a couple of years ago we had an update to it because things do evolve. But that is that is our Bible and our marching orders. We assist, and I highlight that, residents in expanding the sewer system. We don't push the sewer system on anyone. We're not out to expand it. We're out to service people in need, and those people have to come to us. We don't go out and push this on anyone. We're responsible for implementing setting the regulations, policies, procedures. Of course, consistent with town law, with state law. We make plans for the installation and maintenance of the sewer system, but again, we don't push it. Maintenance is certainly a key focus of ours, and the key thing is we manage the budget. This is a business, and we basically are chartered with making sure it runs smoothly and that we do the right thing with the budget, and that's what we're here for tonight, and that's what we'll focus on. I think the key thing, and for everyone to understand, is this is an enterprise fund. This is not part of the regular budget. This is a separate entity, so to speak, a separate municipal entity, financially at least. Clearly, we're integrated with the town and depend on resources, but our budget is separate. It's self-sustaining. We can't run a deficit. We don't have any other control of things than controlling our costs and doing that through rates that we charge. But there is no burden upon the town for this. It's only it's completely funded by people who are connected to sewer. And finally, we're responsible for intermunicipal agreements. We don't do our own wastewater treatment. We do that through Leominster and Fitchburg. So we have intermunicipal agreements with them, and we're responsible for working to secure those along with the Board of Selectmen, who ultimately have to approve those things. Okay. So accomplishments for, and these things always stretch over a couple of years. So everything this should say 1920. Heck of a place to be proofreading my presentation. So first, in terms of accomplishments, we continue to drive for inflow and infiltration, engineering activities and repairs to reduce unwanted water coming into the system. Because unwanted water coming into the system, through leaks or groundwater or sump pumps or God knows what, they cost us money because those have to get processed just like wastewater. So, and we have too much of it, quite frankly. So that's really our major focus in terms of containing cost and reducing cost. We've updated several of our regulations. We're continuously looking at them. We've had significant effort to develop a new irrigation policy. One of the options our customers have is to, if they do a lot of watering of lawns and take water for uses that are not going to end up going down the sewer, they can get an irrigation meter installed and deduct that water from their sewer bill, because our sewer bills are based solely on the water that goes in the house. So if you got a lot of water, and you want to install an irrigation meter, which about 60 residents do, then that's a good thing for them. But our policies needed updating, and we also need to update. We're working on standardizing the meter so that we could read them remotely, because right now we have to pay someone to drive around to all these houses and read meters, and that's kind of crazy in this day and age. And we're also building on the Lunenburg Water District's cooperation. And I'll mention them a few times. They've been very, very helpful, and they're very interested in helping us save our mutual customers money. So they've been helping us out a lot, and we look forward to continuing that. Okay. In terms of plans for the next year, first is to finalize the irrigation meter policy and specify the unit that we want people to use. There are some people out there who I think want to put them in, but they don't want to do it until we identify this one, because old meters will have to be upgraded at some point. So they don't want to put the wrong meter in. So this is important for us to do before spring, and we're very, very close. We're in the process of contracting a third-party engineering firm to go through. We've accumulated lots of data through various engineering studies and just normal data taking from the pump stations, and we need to really get somebody to stand back, a third party who wasn't involved in capturing that data, and take a look at that and give us some guidance in terms of where our issues are. And this is primarily related to the I&I, so that we know where to spend our next money. We got to spend some money, but we need to zero in a little better, and that should give us a more target of where to spend our money to get some return. As a result of that, our plan is to define a multi-year action plan as a result of that data, and then go get some real work done. We need to release a contract for billing software to improve our efficiency. We've been working on this for a while, and this is one of the areas that the Water District has helped. We're going to implement some software that interfaces very well with their data, because they give us the meter readings. That'll allow us to automatically transport this data over, more convenient for both of us, and it'll be more accurate. So we should be getting that in place very soon. We have to go out for an RFP for our system operation. We outsource the maintenance of our system, and that's working out extremely well. It saved us a lot of money, quite frankly, when we did that, and the reliability of the system went up. So we're very happy with that. Every 3 years, you have to go out for a new bid, and we're at the third year. So right now, we're preparing the RFQ to go out and solicit the world for servicing our system. And we hope our current vendor is very aggressive, but we'll see. Okay. Another plan is to work with the town manager on better definition of roles and responsibilities for the DPW director regarding sewer support. We need to investigate opportunities to shift more responsibility to our system operator. That may be an opportunity that the DPW director actually brought up, that we might want to look at that, because as we all know, he's extremely busy,
Just to clarify, the system operator is external to the town?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes. I should have been clear on that. Thank you for clarifying that. Okay. And then we need to continue to work on the review of all the indirect costs. We did some work on that, and Karen's been very helpful in this regard. But as you'll see, every year it becomes more important for us to sharpen our pencil even more. We've got to keep driving down the costs, because our costs are going up from Leominster and Fitchburg and everywhere. But we're determined until we just can't find another nickel to hold the rates. So the only way to do that is to control our costs. And then finally, we want to expand the activity with the Lunenburg Water District. The irrigation meters is the next target, really, for doing that. In the area of financial, administration of the fund, certainly we want to continue tracking, and projections through 2040. I think that's important. We don't want to get any surprises. And we want to establish a policy for capital reserve so that we can start building a dedicated capital reserve. We started that 3 years ago. We're continuing it. We've put some in every year, and you'll see this year we're continuing it. We need to formalize that policy so that it's I think we've identified that we can do about 3% a year. So I think we just need to, formalize that so it becomes automatic. Okay. We're going to continue the efforts to improve the financial business practice efficiencies, including key outsource areas. Again, increase the cooperation with Lunenburg Water District. We have a lot in common, as you can imagine. And we want to investigate outsource the billing and invoicing, printing and invoicing. Right now we do that ourselves, and that's something that can be effectively done. And by that software company who actually, that we're doing the billing things with, and the water district uses them. They do all of the billing for the water district. So again, there's a synergy there, and it's really very beneficial to everyone. We really need to keep working on cost-based accounting methods so that we can really identify where our costs are going and make sure that we're covering our costs, particularly with the town. We shouldn't be a burden on the town, but we shouldn't pay too much also. So we need to, keep digging on at more levels on that. Again, when you get down to the level we're at, we're really looking for every nickel. We really need to improve our tracking of the budget variance, really identifying line item and special accounts so that it's more easy to track. Right now, we know the costs, but it's kind of a big bucket, and it takes a lot of work to figure out where exactly the costs are. And we budget by line items. As you see, there's a lot of line items, but we don't track by those line items. So we need to identify the bigger items that really we want to be able to automatically go into account and see we budgeted this and we get that. And then have the internal controls so that, just like the town does, if one line item starts, running low, the commission is made aware of it before the end of the year, so that we can start, either do whatever actions are appropriate. And then finally, one of the things that would help is it'd be good to increase our tax work-off help. We have a half-time person now. We really would like a full-time person. That's why I'm hoping some of the town's efforts to get more people to participate in that program. We're not limited by money. I understand we've got funding for 12 people in town. We only got 6. So hopefully we could find some more people that would be interested, and raising the pay would be a good start probably. Okay, numbers, here we go. So an overview of the system in general. And I'd like to keep this and have as many years as fit on the page so that we can really get a good idea. So what this does is really reminds us, where are the rates. So these are the rates that we pay Leominster and Fitchburg to process our wastewater. You can see there's a pretty significant difference between Leominster and Fitchburg. So we want to make sure for sure that water going to Fitchburg isn't, groundwater, that it's really wastewater, because that costs us a lot of money to process that water. So looking for I&I that goes to Fitchburg, is a prime source. The good news is only, I forget the number, it's like 77% of our water goes to Leominster. So better than being the other way around with these kind of rates.
Is that measured primarily through areas that are sewer areas, or does that catch areas that are out of the district?
I'm not sure.
Well, for example, I'm sure that there's a pipe that probably runs up my street on its way to Fitchburg, but I don't live in a sewer area.
Yeah, any of this only applies to really people that are connected to sewer are affected by this. So a pipe could run by the house to get from here to there. Clearly, that people don't have to connect to it.
Well, let's put it this way. If I have a lot of runoff from my yard,
Okay.
and I don't have sewer.
Runoff shouldn't go into I&I unless there's a crack in a pipe or manholes, or we have...
Okay, so that's a different pipe, so that's fine.
Yeah, fortunately, which is part of Fitchburg's problem, quite frankly, and why their rates are so high. They still have combined sewer stormwater collection. So they process a lot of groundwater, and that drives their costs.
Sorry.
It's all a good question.
Didn't mean to interrupt.
But like a sump pump, if you put it into your connection, that's groundwater that turns into wastewater.
Okay.
Okay. Lunenburg rate, we have to, clearly we pay those rates going out of town, but then we've got all of the costs that you see tonight and you have in front of you that have to be taken care of. We have one blended rate. We don't split the rates depending on where your wastewater goes. So our rate is $11.50. The part we're mostly proud of is that we've held at $11.50 for the last 5 years. And every year our costs go up, and you'll see they're going up again this year. But we're still holding to the same rate for next year and balancing the budget. Number of users is going up, slowly but steadily. We have 884 connected users right now. There's 1,256 people that technically can connect to sewer. So there's a sewer pipe running by their house. They're in the sewer service area. They are able to connect, but they've chosen not to. So that's sort of the, without any new expansion or to the system, that's the max number of people you would have connected. Okay. So operating budget assumptions. First and most important assumption is that there's no rate increase. So our $11.50 rate is not going to change. We're projecting 18 new connections. It's never known, but Barb does a pretty good job of figuring that out somehow. As I said before, the system outsourcing, our system maintenance contractor is up. We have to go out to bid. So we've put 5% in our budget this year. We usually put 2 or 3, and that's been working, but where we may end up with a new supplier or who knows, we've wanted to put a little bit more in there. It's not a lot, 5%, on a roughly $100,000 contract. So hopefully that will cover it. 8% increase from Fitchburg is we're protecting for it, but it's a pretty certain thing. They just went through a whole recalculation, and they know pretty well what the rate is increase, and it's going to be about 8% for I think the next 4 years even. That was either that or they were going to hit us with 35 or 40% last year. So fortunately, they went the little bit every year route. But 8%'s a lot, and again, it's a lot against a pretty high rate to begin with. Leominster, no rate increase this year. I believe there was one out last year, but no rate increase. We have no indication of one this year, and they usually give us good forewarning on rate increases, so I think that's pretty safe. Legal fees, we've made an arrangement with the town for $5,000 legal fees, so that's in the budget. And we have to keep an eye on that and try to manage to that. Okay. We've reduced the I&I, and this is the inflow and infiltration work, from $34,000 in 19 to $10,000 in next year. We found historically we have a tough time getting all the work done to go spend this money. So we don't want to put too much in here that we don't spend. It's also augmented by, we have an I&I fee. So every connection that's made, there's a fee that a new connection has to pay. So that's added to this $10,000. We spend whatever we receive during the year. So those 18 connections come in, there's additional money on top of the 10. So we'll spend more than 10, but we aren't planning to spend a lot this next year. We need to get this study done that we've talked about, and that's going to take us probably well into next fiscal year. And then the way things work between bids and decisions and all that, we're probably going to be the end of the fiscal year before we start spending money. Unfortunately, it's painfully slow. Okay. And then the new irrigation, meters we expect to come online. We're projecting a $50 annual cost to cover the cost. Right now, those costs are being absorbed by all of the users. So all 800 users are paying for the cost for those 60 meters to benefit those people. So again, from a cost-based accounting point of view, we're going to figure out exactly what that costs, and just like the enterprise fund, make sure that runs, pay for themselves. They say right now less than 7% of the users benefit from it. Okay. John Fitch Highway, it's finally come true. We've been projecting the costs. This is the new IMA. We needed to buy capacity from Fitchburg, and to do that, we had to partially fund their sewer line on John Fitch to increase its capacity. It's taken probably 2 or 3 years for them to accumulate all their costs and flow them down to us. So this year we are having to start paying for that back. The unfortunate thing, in order to get to a balanced budget this year, because there's a capacity fee. Again, when people connect, they pay a part of their connection fee is a separate capacity fee, because we need to not only accumulate to pay this off, but we also need to protect for the future, because that is the future. The next time we need capacity, we're going to have to spend money again. So we're trying to get a little bit ahead of that, but by little bits of increments of cost to new users. So we had accumulated probably close to $20,000 through those fees, since this whole thing came up. We were hoping at the beginning of the process to be able to just sort of, take a little bit of that out every year to augment this cost, which is about $21,000 a year to Fitchburg. Unfortunately, in order to balance the budget, part of it, we ran out of time. I think there's still opportunities, but we ran out of time for finalizing the budget. So we made the decision that we would take most of that money to pay off the John Fitch this year. It won't bring us to zero, because we have some that will be transferred in later this year, and we'll be collecting all along, but that is unfortunate. So unless we find other ways to backfill that, taking that out of the bank, it's going to be even tougher next year, because we won't have that to draw on. We're going to have to find out how to get it out of the budget. Okay. I mentioned before that the infiltration fees will be spent in the fiscal year, so you don't ever really get to see them. We do include a token. I should have capitalized that amount of funding for OPEB, but it is the same basic proportional token that the town does. So we're just trying to stay in parity and have something. It's $650 something. It bears no bearing or impact on the $129,000 that we have in liability, but we're trying to stay in parity with the town. And it requires, no retained earnings, to fund the operating budget. So it is a balanced, to the dollar operating budget. What you'll see is also there's a debt part of the budget, which is a separate accounting, but it's all accounted for here. And as I said, it does include 3% of our revenue, which is $27,000 this year, to go into a dedicated capital fund. Okay, so this is the high level on the revenues, where the revenues are coming from. As you can see, our total revenues are $917,000, and $860,000 of it comes from the user fees. So that is the revenue source. There was some other things coming in. Connection fees, vary a lot. Depends on how many connections. Last year we had a lot of connections, so it was a big number, $92,000. This year at 18 connections, it's more like $19,000. So that's really the major drop. The user revenue is going up, but our connection fees are going down. But they're more typical. last year was very, atypical, and we don't see any large, developments that would do that. This is the Whalum Luxury last building, I think, is what drove that. On the expenses side, see, there's no, major differences here. On the payroll, you might say, gee, boy, that's, how come payroll so flat? We did have one person from the DPW that we were paying who's no longer with us, and so that's why. Otherwise, it would have been the normal, 3% or whatever. I don't think there's anything else jumps out here. What we did is, as we did last year at your request a couple years ago, in our summary, we have, miscellaneous expenses, which is the bulk of it, which is $637,000. So we break that down below. And again, as you can imagine, the bulk of the expenses is paying Leominster processing and Fitchburg processing. So there's over $500,000 of our expenses right there.
Yeah, I appreciate that.
Yeah, that was kind of funny. Miscellaneous. Everything's in miscellaneous. I like that. You got us. Okay, so it's just a bottom line summary then. The overall direct costs, $838K, indirect costs, and that's what we pay to the town. So that's our paying to the town for the DPW director's contribution to us, 15% of him, and the benefits and things for Barb, the things that are not direct payroll. So that goes back to the town, and then the debt service. So this is what we pay for the loan for the system when it was installed. It was a $13 million installation, and this is the debt for that installation that we're paying down. And I think that runs through, I forget the number, 2024 or 2026, I think. So we're sneaking up, on it. So we have a grand total of expenses, both operating and debt, of the $1.7 million. On the revenue side, that's the revenue from the operations, which is the user fees, basically, the $917K. The betterment revenue, so this is the homeowners that are, paying down their betterment fees. As you can see, there's a big disconnect between the revenue receipts and the costs. And that's not unusual, and it's not a surprise. It's because a number of the people have paid off their betterment. They chose not to spread it over 20 years. So, there should be a reduction. The big question and why we have to keep tracking is that difference make sense, and is it sustainable? And it is. So we've projected this out, and we'll be okay. We've got enough in the enterprise fund to carry us through and to make up that difference. And you see here, the betterment difference is $173,000. So at a very simplified level, our operating budget is break even, and so we have to, in the enterprise fund, take out enough to cover the debt service. But again, it is there because it's from the people who paid off betterments. Mm-hmm. We do have 3 warrant articles coming at you, 3, financial warrant articles. One is the general budget article, and it will include some transfers. We get I think it was last year, or FY18, we thought the Fitchburg, John Fitch payments were going to be coming due, so we took out $10,000 from our bank account, so to speak, or that fund, to pay that. It didn't happen. We didn't have to pay it. So now it's sitting somewhere, and we need to get it back into that so that we can transfer it back out. So that's just sort of get money in the right place so it can come out. Mm-hmm. Capital stabilization, we'll put that in there, and then that's about it. Then the capital reserve stabilization, I say, and then our $656. So in summary, the balance, it's a balanced operating budget, in spite of the raising costs. But I do honestly believe that, if we, work hard at it during this year, not at the last minute, but, like starting as soon as we're done this presentation, trying to get our ducks in line so that we can, find out where there's some more cost we can squeeze out of this, out of the system. And again, I highlight the cooperation with the involvement and, and common goals with the town manager and TPW director would be critical for that. We've got to operate efficiently, which means good communications, good, clear responsibilities, good, clear goals. And we've all, made a commitment to work hard on that. There is one other thing that could throw a wrench in that apple cart of a smooth operation, and that's there is in the charter review, current charter review committee's recommendations, there is one article that we believe would severely disrupt our operation and how the sewer commission works, and we've made a request to make 2 modifications to the modification they want. Well, the first request was don't make any modification at all. That'd be simple. If it is, then we would like to get it worded a little differently. If neither one of those accepted, it's really not going to be good. No, just leave it there because I'm hopeful that we'll work that out. And finally, thank our whole team, all those people you saw for keeping the flowing, and really a real shout out to Lunenburg Water District commissioners. They really have been extremely helpful and want to work with us to find ways to help our customers, and that's just a real good way to work, and it feels good, and I give them a lot of credit. So,
Excellent.
Any questions?
Questions?
Oh, just real quick, did I just interrupt you?
No, I was saying no.
Oh, sorry. That slide that said the parcels of access available are 1,200 and the connected is 800?
Yes.
Does that mean there's only 400 available, or is it the whole 1,200?
No, it means that living along current lines, there are areas we could extend to, but living along that have the right, because they paid betterments
Yep.
to connect, there's 400 roughly.
Okay, all right, perfect.
So there's 400 left, okay.
There's 400 left, yeah, 400 people haven't connected. So 2/3 of the people have connected roughly.
I'm glad you asked, I misunderstood.
Yeah. Sir.
So Carl, the 1/3 who elected not to connect, were they hit with a betterment assessment?
Yes, that's why they're allowed to connect.
Better believe it.
Are those numbers in your spreadsheet that you just showed us?
The betterments?
Yeah,
In the budget?
like a betterment who hasn't really connected yet? So somebody...
The people who haven't connected yet have paid betterments, so they're part of the debt service and the debt income. So they're paying for the betterments. They've spread that over 20 years. It was
Okay.
$11,000. So they are paying it. So they are active participants in paying for the system, but they just haven't chosen to connect. And I'm glad they haven't. We're not trying to build a business. We're not trying to expand our customer base. It's better for everybody if they have a good working septic system. Please take care of it. Care and feeding, it's cheaper than connecting. As hard as we work, we can't get as cheap as as those systems running correctly.
Okay. And if that property changes hands, does the outstanding betterment, is that passed on, or do you have to pay it
Good.
during the sale of the property?
Good question. I'm glad you asked it, so people out listening. When a property changes hands, they can pass forward the debt to the new owner. What generally happens, and I think what may be happening, and we need to do a little more homework here, because our retained earnings, our debt service to debt payments are coming in every year more positive than we project them. So it looks like people are paying off their debts, which is good because it goes into the bank. It's not so good because now that delta goes down, and we're not, we're still paying the interest, but they're paid off. But the key point is, I think what's happening, and I've been told, is that it really is up to the bank. If you remortgage, most banks will have you pay it off. You don't have a choice.
Okay.
My understanding.
Do you have a question?
Yeah. So, Carl,
Yes, sir.
The Fitchburg rates went up quite dramatically, and you said they might continue to go up over the next years?
Yeah, the Fitchburg, I'll be wrong with the years now, but probably 5 years ago-ish, they're being forced by the state to spend a lot of money to separate their stormwater from their sewerage. And those costs flow down to us through the rates. They had to go out and take out another big loan, and they made a decision at that point that rather than, death by 1,000 cuts, they raised the rate back then about 30% or something, 20 or 30%, and we had to absorb that all in 1 year. And that was supposed to cover for 5 years. So it must have been 7 years ago, because that 5-year projection, they managed to not change the rate again for 7. 7 years was a couple of years ago, and they had to make the same decision. And it was going to be either 32% or it was going to be 8% a year kind of a thing. And they went for the 8% a year. So that 8% a year is what it's going to be. And then we'll see what happens at the end of that term. So they've gone up, over 50% in a recent time.
Of the 400 that haven't joined yet, do you know if they would be Fitchburg or Leominster? Just curious.
That's a really good question. Because we had to go with this whole Fitchburg thing, we had to go identify, when we bought capacity, it was only for Fitchburg. So we had to go look how many people are going to connect to the Fitchburg line. And I would say it's less than a quarter of those 400, I would guess, are Fitchburg, and maybe way less than that.
Okay. Other questions?
I just got, do you have any?
Yeah, maybe one more.
Go ahead.
Looking at the cost for what we pay to Leominster and Fitchburg, I think it will be very difficult for you to keep your budget at the same level next year. It's pretty much impossible.
Oh boy, that's a challenge. It'd be tough. I think we could do it next year, but keeping it for the year after that, it won't be easy next year. I mean, we've got to get pretty efficient. But it is going to come up. We've had some people even, suggest, well, maybe we should start raising it a little bit, even though we could break even, raise it a little bit every year so that the pain isn't so bad in any 1 year. I'm a strong advocate against that, it's like, why should we hold their money? People should hold on to their money until we actually absolutely need it. It's my feeling. But it's going to get tough unless something drastic changes. We have even looked at, quite frankly, we've taken a look at routing some of the Fitchburg to Leominster. We haven't found a way to do that very cost effectively yet, but we did. But the comprehensive wastewater plan change that I said we made a couple of years ago was exactly to do that, because in the plan, certain areas that aren't sewered today were planned to go to Fitchburg.
Yeah.
So we went in and we at this point, since they're not there, we were able to design them to go to Leominster. So we kind of headed that off a little bit.
But you answered my question without asking, because that's what I would probably think of. Why not shifting some there where it's cheaper? But it costs then also pumping power, electricity, and so on. But still.
Yeah, no, it's still in the back of our mind, and maybe someone will come up with a way to do that. Or it depends on where also, if a different area gets sewered, then it becomes a little more feasible. To do it now with the current configuration, we'd have to, it's probably it's like a $4.5 million project to shift from here to there.
Okay.
So are these systems, based on where you live, is that where you end up going to Fitchburg or Leominster, is that based on the shortest distance between 2 points?
No, in the comprehensive wastewater plan, we've laid out, we did this study, we identified roughly half of the town was what was considered an area of needs. So everything right now in the current plan is laid out to be sewered, and everything is already pre-designed on paper to go to Fitchburg or Leominster. That's what I'm saying. We were able to shift a little bit of the Fitchburg to Leominster on that paper, but otherwise it's pretty well defined where it's going to go.
Okay. Just a final general question.
Yeah.
Where does storm drain water go once it goes into that catch basin?
So makes you ask our stormwater task force lead, but
It's obviously not going to Fitchburg and Leominster.
It's not going in the pipe.
no.
Yeah, by design.
Yeah.
So is it
It
just
pretty much goes in the lakes, I think.
okay, so
The
it's
rivers
just
and the
leaching
lakes.
into the soil? It's just leaching into the ground?
Or running directly into a river which runs directly into a lake.
Okay. All right, thank you.
I just have one quick question. On the meters, you were talking about the meters.
Yes.
You want people to install. Who would pay for the meter and the installation for those?
Those meters have always been paid for and installed by the homeowner.
Okay.
And we've looked at, should we do that? Would it be, but again, it's such a small population for the rest of the users to buy meters, and then you get into the business of, well, when the meter doesn't work, what do you do? So, yeah, it's all homeowner funded. So they got to do their own cost trade-off to.
Just
Yes.
you wanna go? One more. This is more of an educational question. So, do these plants have monitoring devices that reads the inflows into their systems?
We have three places that the wastewater exits Lunenburg. Two of them go to Fitchburg. One is almost nothing. It's in the Whalum area. It's insignificant. The other one's on 2A that goes to Fitchburg, and then there's one over on Graham Street that goes to Leominster. So there's meters at all of our outlets.
Okay. Are they using our data to figure out what our bill should be?
Yes, currently Fitchburg is, and Leominster, not yet, but we need to protect for that too.
Okay. I'm done.
Okay. Anything else from Jay? No?
Then
Mark?
let me also ask an educational question. I can understand the case for irrigation systems, but what about all those pool owners?
Oh, good question. Could we get another chance to advertise or educate? If there is, for pools specifically, but there could be other things, I don't know what they might be. We actually have a process where if a homeowner can come in, fill out a pool filling application, and then we will deduct that from their bill as well. But there's no meter required, extra meter.
It shouldn't happen too often.
It shouldn't happen too often, but it does happen, and it seems like it half the time the homeowner doesn't know of that process, and they're coming in after the fact, which makes it a little more difficult. So that's why I like to remind people, if you're going to have pool filling, or if you're going to, I don't know, have some other huge use of water that doesn't go down the drain for some reason, then please contact us up front, and because we don't, it doesn't cost us anything if it doesn't go down the drain, so we don't want to charge people for it, but we need to know.
Okay. One last sweep up here. All right, anyone in the public have a question that they want to bring up? No? Going.
You can't.
Okay, thank you all.
Thank you.
Good
Have a
questions.
great night.
I like good questions. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, so we already did the minutes. Town manager financial reports? Anything? Karen? Oh, there we go. Yep. Heather?
I'll get it later.
Because it's you.
Good evening.
Good evening. Do we have more good news? We like good news.
Well, I think you know all the good news so far, but just some updates. A little carryover from last week too, but more finalized numbers. So on the revenue side, I will be meeting with the regional assessor next week to discuss the estimate for new growth and whether we need to readjust that number based on their calculations of open building permits and such. So we'll have an update next meeting, hopefully on that. The sewer indirect costs were reduced on the revenue side by $2,294, and this was due to a decrease in health insurance. On the expenditure side, the rates for the health insurance for active employees decreased by 2.45%, like we stated last week, which equated to a reduction of $64,165 from the preliminary budget number. The dispatch assessment increased by $3,076.40 over the preliminary budget number. The detail software for the police department should have been included in the police department bottom line for the $3,720, so that's now in there. The library budget is being adjusted by $450 for certain expense lines to fund them at their requested amounts. There was like $50 here, $100 there. And the Monty Tech assessment decreased by $60,624 from the estimate used in the preliminary budget. And as I mentioned last week, we anticipate the assessing software to increase this year, and we're estimating increase around $13,000. So overall, this is a decrease in expenditures around $104,000.
Okay.
And I will be having a meeting with the superintendent and the business manager on Monday to re-examine the school numbers, now that we have all our unknowns known.
Okay.
So
All of
just
those
update on that.
knowns and unknowns, we still don't have a state budget. We won't until
Correct.
who knows when. So we don't have
Right,
the
that
clean
July,
Chapter 70
yes.
numbers or anything like that, so. Okay, any questions?
Yep. Recently, we heard a proposal for the new fuel tank replacement at the highway garage, and there was talk of going back and reviewing what was approved by the capital planning committee. Do you know, does anybody have ownership of that? And if they do you know any kind of efforts that are going into that?
A lot of effort right now. So to also examine the alternative that was brought up. So the DPW director, the police chief, the fire chief, and I are all putting something together. So we'll have that for an update. But as far as detailed costs, I do have those now for the from the DPW director. So I'll pass that around as soon as possible.
Right, and John and Michelle have also been looking into different numbers, and basically they're looking to not overlap what you're doing, so I know John's probably going to check in if he hasn't already.
Yes.
Yeah, but just, but on the other hand, if you want them to, kick in, they're both more than happy to help with any assessment that you guys are trying to do.
Okay.
So,
Certainly.
yeah.
And I know John's been in touch with, I think, both the police and fire chiefs.
Yeah, he sent some numbers around as well in terms of
Yeah.
numbers of gallons purchased between diesel and
Yes.
regular gas.
Yeah,
so.
and that's something what the police chief was working on, putting together a comparison of those rates. So
Yeah,
he has
yeah, so
those
the intention is to come in with a whole,
cost-benefit analysis, basically.
Do you know if anybody's going to be working with conservation? Because I know there's some few issues where there's a stream out back. Do they need to get involved in this?
They would get involved in the project, and a big component of the engineering costs is dedicated to putting all the safeguards in place to have no impact on wetlands.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
I actually have one more question, sorry. Since you're meeting with the superintendent Monday, you said, to finalize numbers, or is it to add to their possible budget? Or?
That's what we're gonna discuss, their level service budget versus proposed budget with all the changes now that we are aware of.
yeah. And then basically, next week, our presentations are the schools and the Department of Public Works. So, so we'll have Jack, and then we'll have the superintendent as well, presenting their budgets next week.
Yep.
Anything else?
No, just related to the school, I know there's been a lot of concern about it, but we've stated from the beginning, we knew that this was a fluid
Yeah, right.
budget, and that as these unknowns became known, then we could reassess looking at everything. So,
Okay.
thank
And
you.
with that, do we have any public comment from the board? No public comment. Do we have any public comment from the public? No public comment from the, okay, I see that there's still cookies left. So nobody can leave until they're gone. No, actually, thank you all for coming. And with that, again, next meeting, next week, the 14th, is going to be schools and DPW. And with that, I'll take a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Second?
Second.
Okay. All in favor?
Aye.
And we are adjourned at 9 p.m.